Okay, good evening or late afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're in for a treat. Just so that you're aware, we are filming this presentation, and then you'll be able to see it again when we produce a nice little video on it. This is a very special moment for us. It's one of our special events this year. We've invited recipients of the prestigious Pritzker Award to this special fireside type of roundtable moderated by BMES President Shelly Sakiyama-Elbert. The conversation will center around the state of biomedical engineering today and everything from, the latest advances to research funding or whatever they'd like to discuss. But first, we are very honored tonight at the presence of Professor Shu Chien, who needs no introduction, but just as a reminder, he is a past president of BMES, AIMBE, APS, and FASEB. He will provide his own insightful introductory remarks today. Dr. Chien is internationally recognized as one of the foremost pioneers and educators in biomedical engineering. Tonight, we also have the pleasure of hosting our wonderful panel, and we start with, in no special order, Dr. Nicholas Pepas, who was the 2026 Pritzker Awardee from the University of Texas at Austin. The 2019 recipient, Dr. Christopher Shen from Boston University. The 2024 Pritzker Awardee, Dr. Kyriakos Athanasiou from the UCI Samueli School of Engineering. And this year's recipient, Dr. Linda Griffith of MIT. So now it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Shu Chien.
Thank you very much, John. Dear fellow members, good afternoon. It's my pleasure and privilege to give this introduction talk to the roundtable discussion on the state of biomedical engineering, attended by recipients of the Pritzker Award and the BMES members, and with our distinguished members up there. And I'd like to mention that the first Biomedical Engineering Society meeting at San Diego was back in 1997. And that meeting was to be organized by the late Professor Richard Scalak and me together. Unfortunately, Richard Scalak passed away 2 months prior to the meeting. However, he did make a lot of important planning for the meeting that we're able to follow with his wonderful planning. And we were going to have more than 900 attendees. Prior to that, we're only a few hundred attendees, but this was the first one that we felt we couldn't do it on campus, and we need to go to a hotel. So that's the first one for BMES to hold this meeting in a hotel. That was Dick and I decided to do. And this meeting had an excellent scientific program and also recreational activities, such as the visit to the SeaWorld. As shown in this picture, I was up there with the trainer feeding the whales. That was back in 1997. The attendees were less than just under 1,000. But in subsequent years, by the turn of the century in 2001, we have considerably more than 1,000 attendees. As you can see, the numbers increase progressively with time, so that by 2019, it was well over 5,000. You can see this continuous growth, and also the open triangle shows the students. And this is a unique feature of our society. There were so many students participating in these meetings. Then we had the pandemic, and that really put a blunt on our society meeting. And the year after, we will only be able to do it by Zoom. And as you can see, this stippled circle, and the number dropped way down. But after that, the numbers gradually went up, and last year was getting close to before the pandemic. The open triangles show the number of student participants, and this is a unique feature of our society. We have a large number of student attendees. So in BMES, as you know, we have nearly 7,000 members. This is truly impressive that out of this number of membership, we have such a big attendance at the annual meeting. This is very unique among all the professional societies. Also, we have many student chapters, 110 student chapters, so these are unique features of our society. We are very much student-oriented, focused. At the BMES, we have awards, as shown on the slide here. We have all of these awards, and we also have the CMBE, the SIG for the BMES society. And I'd like to point out that besides these prestigious awards, such as Pritzker and the Chien Achievement Award, we have all of these bolded awards. They are for postdoctoral fellows and young faculty and graduate students. This is very unique among all the societies as well. The society has a number of journals. The first, sort of the mother journal, the first one, the most important, is the biomedical engineering, the Journal of Biomedical Engineering. And then we have the cellular molecular bioengineering, and then the cardiovascular engineering and technology, and the Journal of Engineering Education. So the society is growing extremely well over the years, and it was able to weather the storm due to the pandemic. But now we're facing another even greater challenge. That is the challenges from federal policies. And we need to address these problems. What I like to suggest are the following. We should lobby and educate the lawmakers and communicate our concerns to government officials with essential fact-based evidence. We need to participate in regulatory processes, submit comments or petition during the public comment period for new rulemaking to shape regulations. We should provide expert testimony to offer expert analysis and data at legislative hearings to inform decision-making. And then we should build coalitions, partner with other organizations to amplify our voice and increase our leverage. So besides these activities, we also should work on mobilize our grassroots support to activate our members to contact our elected officers through campaigns petitions and phone calls. We should launch public campaign to educate the public on how public impact their community can have on outreach, social media campaign, and other events. We should pursue legal challenges when necessary to challenge the harmful policies by supporting lawsuits or submitting briefs to support litigations by other parties. Then we should work with government agencies to engage regulatory agencies early in the process and participate in rulemaking. So these are what my suggestions are. As we know, the people throw out the brick to induce the jade. So I'm throwing out this brick to induce the superb comments by our panel and audience to get your jade. So in closing, I wish to thank the BMES co-chair, Dr. Karen May Newman, for inviting me to speak at this roundtable and for providing valuable information. I would also like to thank Director Facioni for providing valuable information. Finally, I want to acknowledge all the wonderful BMES colleagues with whom I had the pleasure and privilege of working with over all these years since I joined the BMES half a century ago. And many of these wonderful colleagues are here. I want to thank you, and I appreciate all your wonderful support and the privilege of working with you. So thank you very much.
And now it's my distinct pleasure to introduce the moderator, Dr. Shelly Sakiyama-Elbert, the President of BMES. And I think you have a special presentation.
Okay, to start off, we're going to present Dr. Griffith with her award for this year's Pritzker.
Do I need to get up? Or?
You do need to stand up so we can take a picture. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to set this over here so she doesn't have to hold it for the whole presentation. Okay, wonderful. So first I just want to thank all of the Pritzker Award winners for joining us in this conversation today. I think this is a really meaningful time, as Dr. Chien highlighted here. And so really looking forward to getting your thoughts about the future of our field. So to kick us off, looking back at your own career, what is the most significant change that you've witnessed in the field, and where do you see it heading in the next 10 to 20 years?
So we start here. Okay, I came into biomedical engineering from biochemical engineering, therapeutic production of proteins, and it was an era where we were just getting our hands around molecules and how to measure them and understand all the complexity of biology. And I was very influenced by Doug Laufenberger's book in 1991, Receptors, Models for Binding, Trafficking, and Signaling, because it really offered a blueprint for design principles. How do we understand information flow, not just biochemically, but biophysically, up from cells, subsystems to cells, to tissues, to whole body. And that really gave us a chance to engineer biology. So over my career, of course, this amount of molecular information has exploded, and we've been able to move from deterministic models into data-driven models. And I think the importance of Biomedical Engineering Society, to my mind, is it's the place where you bring AI together with all those biophysical models, because you can do all the AI in the world, but you've got to be able to build things and understand how this information is integrated, not just from a chart on a page, but really physically and dynamically. So what I see the future of this society in biomedical engineering is playing a leading role in problem definition. What should we measure? How should we measure it? How can we build new ways to measure it? And so certainly with my research area, there's an explosion in the ability to build models, living patient avatars, not just a digital twin, but actually a model of that patient using microfluidics and tissue, all these things that we've worked on all these years. So I think we are going to be the leading society to help push animals eventually. We have a move over mice movement. Let's push them off the stage. And I think that's really what we're going to see in the next 20 years, is a movement to really having BME be a leader in understanding information in biology, but by integrating in the physics and building the tools to understand humans better and test therapeutics.
Thank you.
So first of all, due to allergies, I'm losing my voice and my head feels like I'm in a cloud, so please bear with me. But I want to first say how delighted I am to be part of this discussion here, surrounded by incredible colleagues, some of the leaders of our field, and then having one of our giants in the field introduce this discussion. So what I have seen a significant change in the past 20 or 30 years is not going to be related to science. It's going to be related to the perception of the field. 20, 30 years ago, we had a lot of difficulty communicating with industry and letting them know that our graduates could work in their businesses. People were stuck with the concept of the classically trained engineer, the mechanical, the electrical, the chemical engineer. And biomedical engineering was considered by many to be a transient phenomenon that was going to go away. Biomedical engineers were the people who were fixing machines in hospitals. So who are these people and where are they going? And I'm absolutely delighted to see this progressive change where now we're a truly serious field. And our graduates are everywhere in industry, in the biotech and BME industry. And where do I see us going in the next 10, 20 years? I see biomedical engineers everywhere, in every department, at every level, regulatory affairs, R&D, basic science, commercialization processes. In all of these companies, I do see our biomedical engineers as becoming the absolute leaders in the field.
Thank you.
Thank you all for inviting me here today, and thank you all for this great round table. The first question brings back a lot of memories. I started working in this field 58 years ago as an undergraduate. And at those days, the problems that we had in the biomedical field were problems of helping and solving what I would call machinery that was used to help patients. Artificial kidney, artificial heart, of course, artificial lungs, and so on. So we were working as engineers who had little knowledge of the biological field. I came to MIT in 1971 in a group of incredible scientists, and slowly but steadily I learned that I had to learn biology. So for me, the major change in the last 50 years has been true biological interactions with other people, whether they are medical scientists, which they were, but especially molecular biologists. And we changed the field. And if you see the proceedings of this organization 40 years ago and the proceedings of another organization called the Transactions of the American Society of Artificial Internal Organs, and you compare them to the work that is done now, it's really day and night. And all of us, all of you, the students, are educated in all those aspects. Where do I see the field going? I think 20 to 30 years from now, we will have to address seriously what is happening at the societal level. Who knows how the different diseases will be treated and who will be paying for them? We have to be ready for it. We have to put more artificial intelligence courses in our program so that our students are not afraid of calculations and integration of that field. But the most important field, and my colleague said it, is we have to look for convergence. We are not going to solve the problem of cancer because we are just biomedical engineers. We have to work with the molecular biologists, with other engineers, and so on. And that way, hopefully, we will find solutions to some of the most important medical problems.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, first I would just want to say I'm excited to be here. I think this has been a really great meeting in general, and it's nice to be able to cap off having this discussion about past and future. When I started 89 years ago, no, the main difference that I see in what I saw in science back then and what I see now is teamwork. And what I feel like is going on when I started my career, there was a lot of pressure not to collaborate, to sort of demonstrate your independence, to make sure that what you were doing alone. And even you look at the way that grants were awarded, they were awarded to individuals to work on projects where the scope could be achieved with a single lab. And I think that has changed dramatically over the last 2 decades. And that's mainly, I think, because all the problems that we want to solve can't be solved by individuals. They have to be solved by teams. And I think that biomedical engineering was the change that actually drove that cultural change through all of science, because physicians weren't working on teams with other physicians. They were working with engineers. Biologists wanted to extend their work in manufacturing or in stem cells, et cetera, and many of them are collaborating with engineers. And I think it's biomedical engineering that created the glue that allowed these other scientists that were used to working alone to get comfortable working with somebody else with a different skill set to advance a particular common goal. And I think engineers in general are used to working in teams, and I think that's something that we brought as a culture to this whole scientific endeavor, and I think that will continue. Going into the future, I believe that we will solve those big problems, but to do so, we're going to need to allow for those teams to continue to grow and to sort of form alignment so that we can chase those big problems in a way that is not whose lab gets to get credit for what, but it's simply figuring out what are the different pieces that are needed to solve those problems and bring everybody on board to do it.
Thank you. So that's been a great opportunity to look both, across decades past and towards decades in the future. So if we zoom in a little bit more on the near term, what major breakthroughs do you see that are right on the horizon? And what current research areas do you see as most promising for near-term clinical applications?
So we'll just keep going down the road, I think. So I'm going to say something a little unconventional because I may have a different framework than my colleagues here. And one of the things that's taken me by surprise over the past 5 years is citizen science, what I'll call citizen science. And that could be because I study chronic inflammatory diseases, and we develop tools for that. These include computational tools. How do you analyze patients? How do you phenotype patients? How do you model patients? All of these things, working with pharma and so on. But what has struck me is you look at chronic Lyme disease, things like endometriosis, which I spoke about earlier, and there are symptoms and things that go on with patients that are just not paid attention to by the medical establishment. And I personally know a lot of individual people who are not scientists who had children or whatever with terrible problems who just went out and doggedly followed up on some tweet or something like that and actually found something very credible. And when you aggregate experiences of a lot of people who you start to see patterns in some of these chronic diseases. So I would say a most exciting thing to me that is unexpected and I think is going to come out more and more is the aggregation of patient experiences around some of these chronic diseases to drive hypotheses about mechanistic understanding for these diseases and drive scientists. There's much more collaboration between scientists and patient groups these days, at least in the areas that I work in. So to me, there's going to be effects in the clinic from that. There already are from some of the things that people I collaborate with, but I think that's going to happen a lot more. And it's good for us because there is a lot of tension between society and scientists, post-COVID. So I think citizen science and embracing that people can figure things out, they know their bodies, and let's listen to them, is going to be a dark horse for what we'll see really affecting clinical practice in the next 5 years.
So there are so many exciting areas, obviously, and I'm just going to highlight maybe one or two. One is immunoengineering. I was delighted, it's not my field, but I was delighted to attend some of the award recipient lectures this past couple of days, where the role of immunoengineering was highlighted. I mean, it is so fascinating to know that immune cells, let's say a macrophage, can decide to be pro-tumor or anti-tumor, as Dr. Datta showed us on her beautiful slides today, or that macrophage can become pro-inflammatory or pro-healing, depending on the conditions. I think we are very close to harnessing that ability to tune in that polarity in those cells. That would catapult the use of allografts and xenografts in clinical practice once we figure these things out. So that area is, to me, is absolutely fascinating. A second area, and I'm going to put a plug in for tissue engineering. When the field started a few decades ago, the expectations were high. Maybe they were too high. Maybe they were a little too grandiose. And it took a long time to figure out that we weren't getting there as fast as we thought we were going to. But finally, with the advent of so many technologies, we are now beginning to see tissue engineering products reaching the market, tissue engineering products spanning, orthopedics, diabetes, hepatology, cardiovascular, et cetera. And to me, that's the next super exciting area that I'm very, very eager to see evolve.
Thank you.
For me, some of the most important problems that have not been solved are in the area of blood-brain barrier passage. This is an incredible field which, if we solve it, if we are able to transfer certain therapeutic agents into the brain or get information from the brain for what's happening in order to solve a particular treatment, that will lead to the solution of important disease problems. Glioblastoma, also ability to recognize very early stages of multiple sclerosis. These are really, for me, very important areas that need to continue. Immunology and immunoengineering is the other very important area. The final thing that I want to say is, please don't underestimate computation. Mm-hmm. Everything we have done up to now, and I apologize, some may disagree with me, has been mostly in pure water, in saline, maybe with a few peptide extractions and so on. The body is not that. The body is 500 different compounds. Write all the equations and all the possible equations that will happen, solve them all together, bring in artificial intelligence. That's where the future is. And to the graduate students, if you have a new idea, don't be afraid to mention it. And if somebody tells you, oh, this has been done already, you go and check if it has been done. There are people suffering and people dying out there, and they need our help. And we are the best people, along with the medical doctors, to come up with better solutions. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris?
I interpreted your question slightly differently. The way I think about it is, how how does the field move forward and what provides the positive feedback that gives the engine more thrust. And what I'm really excited about is that I now see a clear path for a number of areas. So we think about cell-based therapies and engineered therapies, immune therapies, et cetera. And it's very clear that that area will continue to grow. Gene therapies are already hitting the market, very successful. There's a lot of engineering still to do, whether it's targeted delivery to certain regions of the body, ways of controlling those gene therapies effectively, et cetera. So there's a lot of firsts, and now there's a lot of engineering that needs to follow those firsts to make them more reproducible, more usable in many different disease settings. And the reason I'm excited about those is because in my mind, those are just a stepping stone as a foundation with positive feedback to more sophisticated cell and tissue engineering technologies, again, both as therapeutics, but as Linda had mentioned, also as phantom models for studying human disease. And again, I think that the resources to kind of show success in those places and then feedback once you have those initial successes is now in place. And I don't think it was 10 years ago or 20 years ago. It was sort of shoot for the moon, and if you fail, the field sort of dies for a little while, and then you shoot for the moon again. But now what I'm seeing is sort of year on year, there will be successful products that go out, and that will continue to fuel this area. And then the one other thing I wanted to mention, just because it hadn't been mentioned yet, is I believe that long-term implantables and monitoring and interfacing is also something that will be very important in this field, both material interfaces, electronic interfaces, to the brain, to the spinal cord, to muscle, and the better that we have those interfaces, the better I think our diagnostics will develop and provide opportunities for sort of feedback control and perturbation. So I'm excited about that area as well.
Wonderful. So I think you all have highlighted, how quickly the field is moving right now and how much it's changed, over the last couple of decades. So thinking about this rapid pace of change, what new scientific and technical skills do you view as most critical for biomedical engineers who are entering the field or entering the workforce today?
It's really hard to say that any specific thing because biomedical engineering is so broad. There's themes. Engineers always need more and better computational power, and because we're always doing math, and there's new kinds of math. I think it's more not to forget some of the old skills. What we see, at least I see often with students, is don't forget your transport phenomena and your physics in this rush to do AI and bioinformatics. There's often beautiful insights you get from just old school understanding the way things work. So I think the technical skills will continue to be interface with practitioners. You're never going to get away from going to clinical meetings, really seeing the people who interface with patients. I think the ability to continue to communicate and so on. So, you can say AI skills, et cetera, but that's just another way of saying no more math. It's a different kind of mathematical ability, but you still have to frame hypothesis. You never get away from asking a good question. It doesn't matter how much AI you have. Somebody has to do the measurements, and somebody has to figure out what's the good question. An unsupervised analysis is not a hypothesis-free analysis. You have to have a hypothesis in order to measure something. So I think the skills are how to focus on enough breadth while having a focus on a problem. And I see there's so many more choices. Being able to choose the skills that you need to have an impact, that to me is a huge challenge for students today.
Maybe 10, 12 years ago, I wrote an editorial in the Annals of Biomedical Engineering. I think the title was A New Form of Specialization. And I was talking about the bioengineering or biomedical engineering field, AIMBE accreditation, and where we stand. And in there, if I recall correctly, I described how our field is so large. We straddle such a huge continuum. Where the old adage that you need to focus, maybe doesn't apply to us. And it's more an issue of breadth, not so much, unfortunately, an issue of depth. So we cover a lot of areas, but perhaps not too deeply in most of them. And that's the nature of the beast. That's what our field is. And I subscribe to that. I believe in that because I see the effects of that training. Our curricula are absolutely packed. I don't know what else we can squeeze in there. So, we got to do the physics, we got to do the chemistry, we got to do the biology, we got to do the math, et cetera. We got to do the fundamental engineering courses. We got to do everything. There's so much going on in there. My personal belief is that our students need to be trained on the entire vector of translation, from the basic science all the way to the clinical product, the clinical modality, and every component of that. They're not going to be experts in regulatory affairs. They're not going to be experts in good manufacturing practices, but they need to be able to speak the language. I think what differentiates us is the fact that we are polyglots. We can speak those different languages. And I think that's where we need to continue concentrating on being able to communicate on the entire spectrum all the way to bringing something to become a clinical reality.
I would like to see our students and our young scientists to have a better knowledge and a better understanding of immunology, of genetics. I know they have already some genetics, but that's not enough. And of very difficult calculations that relate, of course, to difficult problems of multi-component systems and so on. The field is difficult. I have students who will say, oh, I'm sorry, I don't understand math. I will not do math, but I will do the rest. You cannot do just the rest. You have to be integrated. You have to be, you have to converse in all areas. And one thing for our young faculty members, and even for the old faculty members, when you feel that you're tired, when you feel that you have only one graduate student and you want to teach only one course a year, maybe you should start considering it's time for you to leave the university and go somewhere else. Because people need us. And people need all the biomedical engineers, and they need our ideas. And people are dying, guys, out there. Every year I see my colleagues, my classmates from high school and from university in Greece, one after the other are passing away. We need to help them.
The way I think about this is that a good education requires a deep understanding of fundamentals. And part of that is what you decide you need to know, you need to master to the level of there's nobody else you know that knows it better than you do. At the same time, you need to know what you decide that you're not going to master, and you need to know where that boundary is. I think people make mistakes when they think they understand something and they don't, and sort of get over their skis. And in addition to that, I think it's also really important to know what the field knows and what the field doesn't know. I think that boundary is really critical. So I think for anybody who's working in any of these problems, you have to know what everybody knows and you have to know what everyone doesn't know. And understanding a clarity of that boundary helps you figure out where you can make a difference. And so I think that's the first step, and that's sort of a little bit of an inward part. And the second step I think that is really important is communication and being able to work with people. Being able to work with people that are, as I said earlier, on your team, inside your team, but also being able to work with people that are not on your team, people that are competing with you at another company, people that are physicians that maybe don't care about whether you have a different way of solving the problem than they do. And you have to learn to be able to work with all of those different types of people to sort of move your thing forward. And I think that that's a skill that really comes as you practice. It doesn't, none of us had that skill at birth. It's something that just comes with continuing to work on those skills as you go through school.
Thank you. And I know, all of you or almost all of you have been thinking about, how to translate the fundamentals and the work that you're doing to develop something that can move from your lab and be translated towards helping patients. So what do you think is currently the biggest challenge in that translational space right now?
This is a tough problem because it varies a lot from devices to drugs and so on. And certainly there are people in the field who do very fundamental work that's not going to directly translate. I don't want to feel like we are leaving those people out of our society at all, because you need that whole analysis of biological systems and how does information flow up to how do we use this to harness and control biology and physiology. And again, I'm more centrally focused on biology. And so in terms of translation, I think, I think Buddy Ratner's talk yesterday was really good about it's all, again, coming down to the fundamentals. You have to figure out your team to translate, echoing what Chris said, is who's your team to take something out? Do you license? Do you start a company? Where is your own personal zen for, do you want to start a company? Or I tend to license things more frequently or help other companies get through a process where they don't know how to approach a problem, and I come in and we work together, very collaborative. And I think I tend to do an enormous amount of collaboration with pharma, and I've done this for 30 years. And it's that teamwork, and again, echoing things Chris said, where you know that you each have something to bring to the table. They have enormous resources, and how do you configure things? And often the biggest barrier, honestly, are the lawyers, because I've had so many, this past year, I literally wrote an email to a bunch of lawyers saying, please go read the story of Solomon and the baby in the Bible, because you were fighting over things, and the expiration date for this funding to be given to MIT is coming up, and there's not going to be a project at all if you continue to fight over this. And they were fighting over something ridiculous. So I feel like there's, in some ways, a disconnect between some of the legal and regulatory aspects, and how do we cut through, but what if a Martian landed on planet Earth wearing a pink tutu, speaking Swahili? What would you do then? It's like, it's not going to happen. Let's role play here. If a Martian lands, they're going to be green, their eyes are going to be big and buggy, so totally not the pink tutu thing. So I find role playing with the lawyers has really, really helped a lot to have them understand this is likely to happen. We need to anticipate that this could happen, and let's build a contract around this. But this language is just like a no-go. So that's been a huge barrier in my world. And then, of course, there's always funding and things like that. But just some of the regulatory and constraints are problems.
So there are multiple issues that impede, translation. Perhaps I can highlight one or maybe two. Many of us who are in academia running research laboratories do not understand this process of translation and commercialization. And it's not part of our training. We don't know it. But I think it would behoove us to learn it, or at least to have the basic stations on that journey well understood. The other thing that I see is that I think there's a discontinuity, a disconnect at the NIH level of funding, where the concept of translation is not really implemented adequately, well enough. Let me give you an example. We do studies, all of us do studies that involve animal models. We do all of these studies in animal models, but unfortunately none of those can be used by the FDA in any of the FDA regulatory processes, because they follow a whole different pathway. They don't sanction those types of animal studies. They have to be under, for example, GLP, good laboratory practice conditions, et cetera. So there's that discontinuity right there. So there's a repetition of work because there's that discontinuity. Maybe one other issue that I'm going to say is that translation or commercialization of the work that we do is impeded severely by the fact that investment groups like angel groups and venture capital groups prefer to fund the temporally easy product. So they're going to fund another AI product, another software-based technology, which in 2 years is going to lead into a product. Whether it works or not, it's a different story, but within 2 years you can have a product, as opposed to coming to me and fund something that's going to take at least 10, 15 years with a multitude of points of potential failure. So there's not enough funding for us to get that work out to commercialization.
For me, there are two small problems related to translation. One is in my interactions with the medical schools. I find that the clinicians or the medical doctors, they don't have enough time to do research. They tell you, I'll see you Friday at 4:30. That's not enough, okay? We have to have more time for the clinical people to come in and work with us. That means, of course, a totally different system of compensation of medical doctors in universities. The second problem is the problem of when the translation becomes true translation. If I go to a company with great data, with multiple studies and so on, have you done human studies? No, I have not done human studies. As an academician, I don't think I should be going all the way to those studies. Let somebody else do it. You pay for them. They are not willing to pay. The system has changed. 20 years ago, it was not exactly like that. You could go with good animal studies and you could talk to them. Right now, it's becoming more difficult. These are my two areas of great difficulty with translation.
Mm-hmm.
Those are great points. All of you guys make great points. I think the thing that I'm most frustrated by is something I don't think I can change. And that is that it's such a long development cycle between when you have an idea, when you show it in the lab, when you convince somebody who's outside the lab to take it on in some way, whether it's a license or you're starting a company and somehow partnering with people to get it funded and to start developing the concept into a workable product, to then go into larger animals, and then eventually maybe in people. And what I've seen over and over again with colleagues is that cycle takes 10, 12, 15 years. And at any point, if it breaks, there's a ton of learning. So you've learned a lot, but now you're 15 years down the road, which means that for any one of us who has a 40-year career, you get 2 or 3 shots from a single idea, right? So you can try many different ideas that are unrelated, but to have a single idea work, it's really hard to get a second bite at the apple and a third bite at the apple as you've learned to adjust. And so what I'm trying to understand is how do we do that as a field to move it forward when a single person's can't shepherd it over that period. So that's the challenge I don't know how to solve yet.
Thank you. So I know we've been talking a lot about the challenges and sort of, what those rate limiting steps are. I'd like to think of a maybe more cheerful world, or sort of what would be your vision in a more grand situation. So if you had unlimited resources, and I know that's a little hard to imagine today in the current climate, but if you had unlimited resources, what grand challenge in biomedical engineering would you tackle today, and why?
Oh, hands down, I would push the NAMs, like NIH is doing, to really bring a huge group of people together to build the tools, to have living patient avatars modeled after, it's really a lot of immunology, but like my lab, we do the best we can, cobbling together a lot of people, but we're talking of, you need really $100 million a year for several years to build a really comprehensive replacement for the animal models, particularly for these immunology diseases, because you have to bring together immunology, biomaterials, microfluidics, imaging, omics, all of these things. And so I don't see how we're going to really get there without having a Manhattan-level project. But I think it's totally worth it because we have really hit the wall using animals in certain disease areas. And I'm not saying, you know, we want to move over the mice. We're not saying put the mice in the wood chipper right now. We are saying that if we had, because a lot of it really is a technical push. A lot of it, and I find in my lab, I spend most of my time raising money to build the tools that postdocs aren't going to build, students aren't going to build, because it's not really academic. We pay vendors to do a lot of stuff. And I sometimes feel like I'm a startup company just to get the tools we need to study the biological questions. So if it were me, I would say, you know, $100 million a year for 5 years to get these NAMs to the level that every lab could be using them instead of mice.
So if we have unlimited resources, you said, right?
Yes, unlimited.
Oh, say $1 billion a year, $1 billion a year.
Yeah,
Okay,
there you go.
Sorry, I lowballed, because I work in gynecology, I'm used to doing that.
So, you know, just the thought of thinking about what would I be doing from scratch, again, now that I'm toward the end of my career. But you said unlimited resources, so let's say I had a lot of years ahead of me to retool, restart. I would definitely look into the immunology aspect of cancers, and going back to the lecture that Dr. Data gave us today, that was absolutely fascinating to me. Not my area at all, but I'm fascinated by that and the ability to, you know, solve some of the most intractable medical problems that we have through those techniques, those approaches. And similarly, a little bit closer to the work that we do now, tissue immunoengineering, where we try to tissue engineer things, but by immunoengineering them, so we can again, you know, use the allograft and the xenograft, and you know, and solve some of these problems. I think that's what I would do.
I would take the question of my dear colleague, Shelly Sakiyama-Elbert, and say, if I were the Minister of Education or the Minister of Health of a medium-sized country in the world, I would collect a very large number of faculty members, or excuse me, scientists, and I will start working in areas such as autoimmune diseases and advanced therapeutic systems, including finally an artificial heart, which doesn't exist right now. And this was my PhD 54 years ago, so you can imagine. And I would have them in an environment where whatever they need would be provided to them, and they would be evaluated at the same time. Because in the long run, the best ideas come from the young people. Mm-hmm. The very young people. And yes, sometimes these ideas may say something that sounds a little bit unusual. Some of you will say stupid. There is nothing stupid. All the ideas are great, but let the people talk and come up with these new ideas. Mm-hmm. And hopefully that will help that country where I'm the Minister of Education. I don't plan to be a politician, but I want to leave you with one statement which you heard already. I'm bullish on health problems, and I will continue working with them and solving them until the day I die, because I love people. I love poor people. I love people that have problems, and they need help, and the help comes from us. It doesn't come from the minister of whatever, okay? Mm-hmm. So that's all.
You said unlimited resources, right?
Right, and we really want to think about those big challenges.
I think I would want to change the way that we do research. If I had unlimited resources, I would structure it so that biomedical engineers could go into the clinic, could go into pharmaceuticals, could go into medical technology companies as they are facing their challenges. and that all of those places where they go, those people would be paid for the time to pause and share openly, transparently, honestly, what are the things that are working great and do not need further solutions, and what are the things that are not working that they wish they could do better. And I believe that there are a lot of problems that are out there in those sectors where people don't either have the time to articulate them, they don't have the incentive structures to share them. A lot of farmers are not going to tell you which drug didn't work because they don't want to tell you why their company failed in a certain area, or why a certain clinical trial was designed incorrectly, or why a certain preclinical package was the inappropriate package for safety for a drug. So we can't see those problems unless they share it with us. And as you said, I believe the young people in this audience and everywhere else in this field, if we could have access to those places, then I think it would help us identify what are the problems that need to be solved, and I believe that we all have the skills to solve them. So I would use the unlimited resources to sort of provide a change in the incentive structures to allow for all of these organizations to feel safe and share those problems so that we can move forward.
Thank you. And now as we think about winding up our time here, I'm going to pose one final question to you all. So we've been really focused at the meeting here in thinking about, what is the real impact of biomedical engineering on society and building public awareness for what we do. And our campaign, is really taglined around what would a world without biomedical engineering look like? What would the impact be there? So I'm going to ask you, in your mind, what's the thing that we would really lose in a world without biomedical engineering?
We'd lose a lot of our diagnostics, but of course a lot of our therapies, and I'm going to go to a lot of our cell therapies and a lot of our molecular therapies, because engineering is inherently involved in even validating targets, getting them into the clinic, and formulating them. So it's, we're part of all of the process. We're part of all of the process.
So a world without biomedical engineering, well, that world would be absolutely bleak and painful and horrible. And I congratulate our society, BMES, and our entire field that's trying to get the word out and remind people of their hip implants, of their pacemakers, of their glucose monitors, of all of the things that we bring to better life. And we need to make that really, really strong. And everybody needs to understand how central and important we are to healthcare. So I cannot imagine a world without biomedical engineering, because such a word would be unbearable. And because I know I don't have very much time, and this is the last question, if I can take just a tiny detour here and say the following. We live in times that are just terrible. There's animosity, there's polarization, there is stress. All of us are anguished, and our young people are especially anguished. And I just want to remind everybody, in my opinion, this is just a temporary phenomenon. It's going to go away. We do the right thing. We are doing the right thing. We're in the right field. We're pushing in the right direction. The world will come back to its senses. Don't lose hope. We're going to persevere this. It's going to be short-lived, and we're going to emerge on the other side, and we're going to be winners again.
Kyriakos gave you already some of the important answers. Without biomedical engineering, there will be a world full of pain. You will not be able to walk. You will not have the hip replacement. You will not have the monitors. Diseases will be transferred from one to another. Need I say anything else?
Exactly.
I'll stop here.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything else to add to that. I think the world could not progress without biomedical engineering. As you said, whether it's from MRI and CT and all of the medical imaging that we all live on, to the pharmaceuticals and cell and gene therapies that have been developed. Biomedical engineering is the key engine that takes innovation and turns it into things that people can actually use.
What we may want to do for the campaign is bring out things, most people think of MRI engineers did that, but some of the molecular, like Keytruda, we saw a talk yesterday about how Keytruda got in, and a lot of people know someone who has been, has gotten some of these drugs. So maybe some of the highlighting some of the less obvious engineering that goes in, not just making a device, but some of the other things that go into making these possible for the campaign, if we're going to educate, things that people might not think about.
I think that's really critical. And I think really how we're the glue, right? We really help folks take things from those very basic discoveries, and we're the glue that helps make it possible
we
for
define
those things
problems
to be
often
therapies.
too.
Right.
Yeah, and we define problems. We define that this is the path forward. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank all four of you for taking the time to join us today. I know this has been a really fun discussion to listen to, and I hope the audience has enjoyed it as well. Thank you to Shu for your opening remarks and really setting the stage for this wonderful hour. So thank you all for joining us and appreciate your time here today.